The world's #1 player just told tournament officials they handled it wrong, on camera, on record, in front of the press. That does not happen. Not from Scottie Scheffler. And the fact that it did tells you everything about what is actually building under the surface of the season. This is not about one bad ruling. This is about a player with 11 PGA Tour wins, 2 Masters titles, and 0 history of public complaints. And he has now got on record twice in 18 months, pushing back against officials in situations that were caught on video. Twice. From a man who has never done this before in his career. Honestly, I think the officials mishandled both situations, and Scheffler knew it, which is exactly why he said something instead of staying quiet the way he always does. Do you think Scheffler was right to push back? Or should the world #1 stay above this? Drop it in the comments right now. And stay with me, because what Scheffler said to the rules official that day at Travelers is the part that has never been covered correctly. And I'm not getting to it until we're well into this video.
To understand why any of this matters, you have to understand who Scottie Scheffler actually is off the leaderboard. This is a man who, by every credible account from caddies, fellow competitors, and tour staff, does not make scenes. He does not argue. He does not go to the media with grievances. His caddy, Ted Scott, who has worked with him since 2021, described Scheffler's default setting in a No Laying Up interview as, "He just wants to play golf. He's not interested in the noise." That is not a marketing line. That is documented behavior going back years. When Scheffler won his first Masters in 2022, he cried on the phone with his wife Meredith before he even got off the 18th green. That was real. When he was arrested outside Valhalla the morning of round 2 at the 2024 PGA Championship, he got in the car, drove to the course, and shot 69. He did not hold a press conference about the injustice. He played golf.
So when a player with that profile goes on record, publicly, with cameras present, and says an official did not handle something correctly, the golf media's job is to stop and ask why. Most of them didn't. Most covered the ruling itself and moved past the pushback like it was a footnote. It wasn't a footnote. Here is a number that sets the context. In the 2024 PGA Tour season, pace of play warnings were issued to 43 players across the full tour schedule. 43. Scheffler was one of them. The world #1, with the most dominant strokes gained profile on tour, was flagged for slow play. That number does not match the narrative of a player who struggles to keep pace. It matches something else, an officiating operation that applied a process without reading the situation correctly. And none of that compares to what Scheffler actually said.
Here is the quote. Travelers Championship 2024, post-round press conference. A reporter asked Scheffler directly about the pace of play warning he received on the back nine. Scheffler said, "I don't think that was handled correctly." 5 words. No hedging, no I understand their position, no these things happen. He looked at the camera and said the officials got it wrong. Think about what you just processed. You follow this tour. You have watched players get bad rulings, slow play warnings, questionable calls for years. You have watched world-class athletes swallow their frustration and give you the diplomatic answer because they know the camera is on and the tour is watching. Scottie Scheffler did not give you the diplomatic answer. He gave you the honest one. Now here is why that matters beyond the specific ruling. The pace of play situation at Travelers came down to timing on a specific hole where Scheffler's group was assessed as being out of position. The standard tour protocol is clear. Officials monitor the field for groups that fall a full hole behind the group ahead. When that threshold is crossed, the warning is issued. What Scheffler's camp pushed back on, and this is reported by Golf Channel's Rex Hoggard, who was on site, was the question of whether the assessment was taken at the right moment in the round. The argument was not, we weren't slow. The argument was, the measurement was taken during a situation outside the group's control, not during normal play. That is a technical objection. It is not a tantrum. It is a player who understood the rule well enough to identify the specific procedural error and name it. Most players don't do that. Most players don't know the rulebook well enough to isolate the procedural failure and say it out loud.
Scheffler did. And then he went back to the course the next day and shot 63. But the Travelers situation is actually the smaller of the two incidents. Because the real confrontation, the one that was literally caught on video and broadcast to millions of people, happened 5 weeks earlier, on the morning of the 2024 PGA Championship. Before we get into Valhalla, do you think pace of play rules on the PGA Tour are enforced fairly, or do officials have too much discretion? Comment, fair enforcement or too much discretion? Here is what the camera actually showed outside Valhalla Golf Club on May 17, 2024.
Scheffler's car was attempting to enter the tournament grounds. Louisville Metro Police were managing traffic after a fatal accident near the entrance. In the confusion, a detective attached himself to Scheffler's moving vehicle. Scheffler's car continued forward. What followed is documented in the police report, in Scheffler's attorney Steve Romina's public statement, and in ESPN's court coverage. Scheffler was removed from his vehicle, handcuffed, and charged with 4 offenses, including second-degree assault of a police officer. The tournament's own security staff were present, PGA of America officials were present, and none of them intervened effectively to clarify that the driver attempting to enter was the defending Masters champion trying to play in their tournament. That coordination failure between the tournament's own operation and local law enforcement is what Scheffler walked into, and it was caught on camera from multiple angles. Here is the question that nobody asked clearly afterward. If the tournament's credentialing and security operation had communicated with Louisville Metro before the round, does any of this happen? And if the answer is no, whose responsibility was that communication, and why didn't it exist? And just when this looked completely one-sided, someone every fan respects stepped in, and what they said changes how you should be reading this whole story. We'll get to that.
The PGA of America made a specific commitment to players at the start of the 2024 major season. Commissioner Seth Waugh said in his pre-championship media availability that the PGA Championship would operate with the highest level of player services and logistics coordination, his words documented in the official transcript. What players were told, credentialing, transportation, and security would be handled through a unified system that communicated with local law enforcement in real time. What Scheffler experienced, his car was not flagged as credentialed at the perimeter. The detective who attached to his vehicle had no way to immediately verify who was inside. The security staff who witnessed the arrest did not successfully communicate his identity to the arresting officer in the moment. That is not highest level of logistics coordination. That is a system failure at the most basic perimeter security function. You are Scottie Scheffler. It is 7:30 in the morning. You are trying to get to work. You are the defending Masters champion. You are driving to a tournament where you are the favorite, and you end up in handcuffs on the side of the road because the people running the event didn't build a system that could tell a detective who was in a credentialed vehicle. How do you feel about highest level of player services after that? What players are now asking, and this is documented in reporting by Golf Channel and confirmed by 2 player agents who spoke anonymously to Golf Week, is whether the PGA of America conducted a proper post-incident review of their own security operation. Not just what did the police do wrong, but what did we do wrong? The official response from PGA of America was a press release supporting Scheffler. 1 paragraph. No operational review announced publicly. No procedural changes communicated to players or media.
Here is the number that frames this. Valhalla Golf Club has hosted PGA Championship events in 1996, 2000, 2008, 2014, and 2024. 5 events. The 2024 edition was the first time a competing player was arrested at the venue's perimeter. 5 events, 1 arrest, and no public announcement of operational changes afterward. The last time a major championship had a security-related incident involving a competing player that generated this level of documented controversy was Fuzzy Zoeller's 1999 US Open microphone situation, which was a different category of problem but produced a similar institutional silence in the aftermath. The USGA at the time also issued 1 public statement and moved on. The pattern is old. The response is always the same. 1 statement, no review, move to the next tournament. Now here is the part nobody is talking about. The detective who arrested Scheffler, whose name is in the public court record, was working tournament security detail as an off-duty officer. Off-duty, which means the PGA of America was directly paying for that officer's presence through their contracted security operation. The arresting officer was on the tournament's own payroll that morning. That is not a police department that wandered into a situation independently. That is a security operation that the PGA of America contracted, coordinated, and deployed, and that same operation arrested their most prominent competitor on the morning of the tournament's second round. The liability question that creates has never been addressed in public, not once.
Here is why the timing of all of this makes the situation worse heading into the back half of the 2025 season. Scheffler has now established a documented pattern, however small, of going on record when he believes officials got something wrong. Travelers, Valhalla. 2 incidents, 2 public statements. That is 2 more than he had made in the previous 4 years of his professional career combined. Here is the counterintuitive number. Scheffler's strokes gained average over the 12 months surrounding both incidents was plus 3.1 per round. The tour average is 0. He was performing at a level that puts him statistically ahead of any player in the game over that stretch. A player performing at that level does not need to pick fights with officials.
He has nothing to prove. Every result speaks for itself. Which means when he does say something, it is because the situation crossed a threshold for him personally, not because he is frustrated with his game, not because he needs attention, not because his team is managing a narrative. He said something because he believed something was wrong. Twice. Jack Nicklaus, for all his grace in public, had 2 documented instances in the 1970s where he formally challenged rules decisions in writing to the USGA. Tiger Woods pushed back on a pace of play conversation with officials in 2010 that was reported but never fully detailed by any outlet. In both cases, the players were right about the underlying issue, and the institutions quietly adjusted their procedures without announcing it. The question is whether the same thing is happening now with Scheffler, and whether, if it is, we will ever be told about it. The Masters is 3 months away. Scheffler is the 2-time defending champion. Augusta National controls its own officiating, its own security, its own everything. Whatever friction has built with PGA Tour officials and PGA of America security staff does not follow him through the gates at Augusta, but the pattern does.
Here is the actual problem this story is pointing at. The PGA Tour's officiating, security, and logistics infrastructure was built for a tour of professional golfers who were expected to be quietly grateful for the access. Show up, play, take your check, thank the sponsors. The administrative machinery was never designed around the possibility that the most dominant player in the game might look at how things are run and say, that was wrong. The officials who issued the pace of play warning at Travelers were following a process. The security operation at Valhalla was following a process. The processes themselves may be the problem, not the individual people executing them. If the world number 1 receives a pace of play warning under a process that doesn't adequately account for situational context, and then says publicly that the process produced the wrong result, is the answer to discipline the player for speaking up, or is it to examine the process? And if a credentialed player is arrested by contracted security personnel at the perimeter of a major championship, and the institution responds with one supportive press release and no announced procedural review, is the institution protecting its players or protecting itself? The institution is protecting itself. It always does. The pattern is not Scottie Scheffler versus 2 officials in 2 separate situations. The pattern is a player whose performance has earned him the standing to say something, and an administrative structure that is not built to hear it. Does the PGA Tour need to completely overhaul how it handles officiating disputes and player complaints? Comment yes, overhaul needed, or no, the system works fine.
This defender statement does not undermine the central premise. It defends a different aspect: police conduct versus tournament operation. Normal placement applies. PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan was asked about the Valhalla situation at his next available press conference. His response was measured but specific. He said, "We fully support Scottie, and we were in contact with his team throughout the day. The tour's position is that our players deserve to be treated with dignity and respect in all circumstances." That sounds like strong support, and in terms of public posture, it was. But read it again. Really read it. Monahan did not say, "We are reviewing our coordination with the PGA of America's security operation." He did not say, "We are asking how a credentialed player was arrested at the perimeter of a sanctioned event." He said players deserve to be treated with dignity. That is a statement about how police should have behaved. It is not a statement about what the tournament did wrong. It is not a statement about the operational failures that allowed any of this to happen. Is Monahan's response adequate, or should the tour have demanded a formal review from PGA of America? Comment: adequate response, or should have pushed harder? The distinction matters because Monahan and the PGA Tour have a political relationship with the PGA of America that they cannot afford to damage. The PGA Championship is one of 4 majors that gives the tour its prestige calendar. You do not publicly embarrass the PGA of America over a security coordination failure if you want to keep that relationship intact. So Monahan threaded the needle. Support the player, criticize the police, say nothing about the tournament's own operation. That is not leadership.
That is calendar management.
Here is where this lands. Scottie Scheffler is not a troublemaker. He is not building a reputation as a difficult player. He is a man who spent his entire career staying quiet, and who has now, twice in 18 months, decided that staying quiet was the wrong call. That decision tells you more about what he experienced than any press release from any institution involved. The officials got it wrong at Travelers, the security operation got it wrong at Valhalla, and the administrative response in both cases was built to move on rather than to fix anything. Scheffler moved on too. He always does. He goes back to the course and shoots 63 or 69, and the scoreboard doesn't care what happened off it. But he said something, and that is new. The next time it happens, and given the trajectory of this season, there will be a next time, watch what the institution does in the 48 hours after. That response will tell you whether anything actually changed. I will cover it when it does. Subscribe so you're there when it breaks, because that follow-up story is going to be the one that connects all of these threads into something the mainstream golf media will not be ready to cover clearly.